Salam everyone. So in this lecture, I'm going to explore a common thing among all Muslims around the world, which is the concept of fasting, right? Or doing siyam, right? So the word that we're looking for and we're going to explore in depth is the word siyam, right? Or saum is the triliteral root word, swad, waw, and mim, right? Which occurs 14 times within the Quran itself, in 5 derived forms. But before I dive into the actual objective, I'm going to just lay out the agenda so we can logically follow as to what it is that we're about to explore and then where are we going to end up with. Okay, so let me bring up my one slider here, just the basic agenda for this lecture. So the first thing I'm going to do moving forward is look at the meaning of the root word swad, waw, and mim, right? In other words, what is it the actual word means in Arabic language, along with all of the synonyms, right? So it's just not one meaning for this particular word. It has different derived forms, as we're going to take a look at. But essentially, take a look at all of the synonyms, all of the context of this word being used within the Arabic language and otherwise as a word itself. So after first step, which is understanding the various meanings of this word in general, right? Not to think of it as fasting, okay? Fasting means not drinking, not eating. This is typical of various religions, even the Jewish religion as well as the Islamic world as well, and Christianity as well, in some one form or the other, okay? So it's related to food, water, or not drinking, and so on. So apart from what we typically know, so this lecture, if you can just, get that aside and just focus on the actual meanings of the particular word, and then later on we'll come to a conclusion after we run through the exercise. So the first thing, of course, once again, is meaning of the word itself. And then step 2, I'm going to walk through all of the 14 instances in the Quran itself of this word in various derived forms. So for example, bring this down here. The same word, the word occurs 14 times in the Quran in 5 derived forms, twice as form 1 verb, yaṣum, once as the noun Saum, 9 times as the noun siyam, once as the active participle, ṣāimāt, and once as the active participle as well, ṣāimīn. So these are the 14 types, and it occurs in about 3 or 4 chapters, surahs in the Quran. I'm going to walk through each one of them. Okay. So after step 2, we're going to take a look at all of these verses, of course, in context. So not just pick the word, take a look at the meaning in the Quran, but also understand what God is actually letting us know in each of these instances of the word being provided in different surahs within the context. And step 4 is when you would actually conclude yourself what is the real benefit, what is the purpose, why fast, what is the real thing behind this concept. So I will leave that to you, of course, and of course I'm going to give my conclusion as well once we're done. So in addition to all of these 4 steps, okay, I'm also going to cover a little bit of Torah, which is, or maybe some Talmudic teachings, which is similar to the hadith that we follow in the Muslim world, in the Islamic world. We typically follow the hadith, which is the Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim being the most authentic ones, and so on, right? So these books of hadith, of course, are the sayings of the Prophet, but written by men after hundreds of years, right? So similarly, in Judaism, which is, of course, follows, or the Islamic teaching rather follows Judaism, typically the hadith part, because the Talmudic teachings is basically what the Jewish rabbis have expounded based on the Torah itself, because they also say that Moses also gave some oral teachings, right? So these are the oral teachings, in other words, just to keep things simple, that the Judaism has created. Those are called Talmudic Jews, right, or Talmuds. So I'm going to cover a little bit on that too, so you get the concept of where the Muslims are actually getting all of these concepts from, And you'll be surprised. I'm going to give another lecture, focus on my research on that, just on that a little later on in the next lectures as well. But for now, I'm going to focus on the concept of siyam, fasting, what it entails, the meaning, instances, context. All right. So, and those of you who haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I would appreciate if you subscribe. And of course, write your questions down within the comments area and hit the bell notification so you get notified. Because if you don't know me, don't know my work, I've been a researcher of this particular book, and of course theology in general, other religions as well, including history, archaeology, also a little bit of research on that. So my focus is just understanding the Quran by itself, because it claims to be a complete book. So if it is a complete book, which we believe it is a complete book, then it has all the answers, right? So we don't need to go here and there, or we don't need to inject anything in the Quran, because it should have all the answers for us. That's exactly our objective here. Again, my name is Syed, and I'm a PhD researcher. I love to do research. This is one of my passions, along with other things that I do, but this is one of the key areas. All right, so let's jump right in. So I'm going to minimize the agenda here. So here are the 14 times that this word occurs in the Quran in 5 derived forms. I already mentioned that. And on the bottom here, you'll see the details of each of these words. So the verb form 1, to fast, occurs in chapter 2, verse 184. That's where it basically starts. This is the first instance of the word yaṣum, right? And then the second is verse 185 in chapter 2. And then so on. So the noun also occurs in chapter 2, 183, which is the verse prior to 184, and so on. So I'm going to cover each one of these in context as we move forward. So before I move forward, let's get into the actual meaning of the word. So what typically we use as researchers, and every scholar uses this, every student of the Quran or other books uses the Arabic English Lexicon by Edward William Lane. You can download this, by the way. I'll provide this link in the description below so you can take a look at that. You can download the entire PDF. And if you navigate to page 1750, make it bigger so you can see, you will see the word Saum, okay, which is the swad, waw, and meme root word. So let me in fact open up the PDF. Same thing, I have it downloaded, right? So it's easier for me. Make it a little bigger so you'll be able to see. Perfect. There we go. So let's walk through the different meanings of the actual word Saum. Okay. The first thing that Lane mentions here, it means the month of Ramadan. Okay. So that's one of the meanings, and that's pretty common. And then moving forward, it is also said within the Arabic-speaking world, "Akamtu bil Basra Thawmain," which means I remained, stayed, dwelt, or abode in Al-Basra to Ramadan. So the first sense, of course, is that it could be a time phrase, right? So people typically talk about this as being a time phrase, right? Saum also means a Christian church, as though for Mahal Saum, the place of station, for which simply means, think of this as like you being positioned or staying at a certain place for some time, right? So again, it also refers to as a place of station. For example, like church, that their manner was to stand at prayer, whereupon their meetings unto the purpose, that purpose had the names of stations given them, right? So that also is one of the synonyms or the implied meanings of the word Saum. Then we have ṣāim, which means the dung of the ostrich, and in the dial, certain tree, right, with the form of the figure of a human being, like ugly in appearance, right? So in other words, this is another derivative, ṣāim, which means something that you dislike, okay? Right? So the first meaning was like, okay, staying in one place, the month of Ramadan, and then things that you kind of dislike, right? And it kind of goes on and gives the example of zakum, which is also in the Quran, a tree without any leaves, right? And that's something that the Quran references also. So something that is disliked. okay, or ugly in appearance. All right, let's move down a little bit. It also kind of implies meaning abstaining, okay, much or often. So you abstain from something many times or much, or you abstain from something quite often. So that's also sign. For example, rajulun sawamun qawwamun, right? One of the expressions. So let me go to the next column here. Continue on with the meaning. Scroll up. Perfect. So rajulun qawwamun, sawamun qawwamun means a man who fasts, yaṣum, often in the day, and who rises often in the night to pray. Or here's the important part. The absolute meaning, the absolute sense for the word ṣāim. This is said to be the signification in the proper language of the Arabs, which means abstaining, to abstain from something. We don't know what yet, we just know it means abstain. And in the language of the law, observing a particular kind of abstinence. Now we know that abstaining from food and drink and quietness, which means like sexual intercourse, okay? So these three things is basically in an absolute sense according to the proper language of the Arabs. You can also abstain from speech. It is applied to a man or a woman, okay, or to two men, or to a number. So you can abstain from speech, food, drink, and quietness, okay? All right, moving on. It also signifies abstaining from eating once again, and in a secondary application, serving God in a particular manner. That is also a secondary application of the word ṣāim, okay? Fasting. Moving on, abstaining from food, from speech. This is a new one, right? So abstaining from either not talking all day long, and this is also, by the way, if you recall, in the Quran, Prophet Zechariah was, I believe, he's the one whom God said, "You will not speak to anyone for 3 days," right? If I'm not mistaken. Okay, Salasa. So he was, and he didn't speak. He only, made hand gestures. Okay, so he abstained from speech. If I'm not mistaken, this was Surah Al-Ma'idah, but again, you have a look. So abstaining from food, from speech, or from going along or journey. So if you're not traveling, if you're stopped from travel, you're actually in a state of ṣāim, right? Saum. So you see different contexts that we're actually understanding the meaning of the word ṣāim. So it's basically abstaining yourself from a number of things. So moving on, it's also applied to a horse, maybe standing still without eating of fodder or without eating anything, or abstaining from eating of fodder, or standing upon his four legs. Once again, the concept is abstinence, okay, or abstaining yourself. Moving on, next meaning is ma'u ṣāim, which means water that is still or motionless. Da'im and qa'im, right? So once again, it's motionless. That means you're in a constant state, in a one particular state, still or motionless. The synonyms are, of course, qa'im, like aqimus salah, right? So you always uphold your salah, okay? And that's what qa'im means. So masam, moving on, means station or standing place of a horse, right? So you get the idea so far, okay? Perfect. So I'm going to continue on and go to the last column. Scroll up. So once again, I think then we move on to the next word. I believe this will be the next one here. All right, perfect. So we understand the various meanings of this particular word, Saum. Okay, smaller. There we go. So now that you have a good understanding of the various meanings of the word Saum, let's navigate to the actual context where all of these verses in the Quran would say something to us. Okay, and then the first reference that I'm going to start with is Surah Al-Baqarah, which is chapter 2, and it starts with verse 183. And then we'll go to 184 and 185 and so on. So it starts with the noun itself, which is Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. Okay? So let's open up the Quran here and go to 283. Here we go. So we're going to start with chapter 2, 183. So God says, "O you heed warning, fasting is ordained for you as it was ordained for those before you. كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون, which means, okay, the very first instance of the word siyam, right, occurs in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 183. So here, what God is simply saying, "O you heed warning, fasting is ordained for you as it was ordained for those before you." So the first thing we know for sure, that as a fact, that this is not something new. This is not something for the Muslims only. Siyam has been conducted by people before the Quran was revealed, okay? Which means people of Torah, people of Injil, they also did Siyam, okay? Now I'm not going to relate this to fasting at this point in time, because our goal is to understand the various meanings and then take a look at the context, and then we can then decide, all right, what is a better fit, a consistent fit within the Quran itself. Because keep in mind, the Quran claims, it says, it is a complete book and it has no inconsistency, right? Ziyaraj, which means there's no inconsistency in this book. So if the book says something on one chapter, Allah says in a different chapter, it has to flow all of the same, right? So it can't go, haphazard or have an inconsistent behavior within the speech itself. So the fact that we have ascertained so far is that Siyam is nothing new. It has been, coming along since ages, okay? And then we also know that the reason why fasting is ordained is because that you might be in prudent fear. So here's the reason of fasting or doing Siyam. And again, this is a noun. So to be in prudent fear, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, to have taqwa. Okay, this is the reason why you would do Siyam. Perfect. Let's go to the next verse. Days numbered. أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ, few days. Days numbered. So we don't know how many yet, but we know that it's Siyam. It has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. We know the reason, and we know it's a few days. And then we continue on. And whoso is sick among you or on a journey, a number of other days. So God says, can't make these few days, then do it some other days. So to continue, God says, and for those, all of whose strength is taken by, it is a redemption. Okay. So we know that this is also a fidya. So now we know that Siyam, if you can't make it, you can, do some fidya, of course, if you hold true to the conditions, such as if your strength is taken away. Okay. You would have to feed the needy, ta'am and miskin, and whoso does good voluntarily, it is better for him. Okay, continue on. And that if you fast, it is better for you. وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ, if you would know, in kuntum ta'lamun. So if you know that, of course, fasting is better, or Saum, right, is better for you, if you would know. A moon of Ramadan was that in which the Quran was sent down, or as commonly translated as the month of Ramadan, was that in which the Quran was sent down as guidance for mankind. So we know that the Quran itself is not for Muslims only, it's for linnas, right? It's for mankind, it's for everyone. Similarly, if you recall, Masjid al-Haram was also for mankind. I don't know why is it just for Muslims these days, right? All right, it's a big question for me. But anyways, that's a separate lecture, separate story. But we know that the Quran is for mankind. And a clear evidence of the guidance and the division, the Furqan. So whoso among you witness the month or the moon, let him fast in it. So whoever is a witness for that month particular, or this particular moon, let him fast in it. Okay, so this is not during, not over, not in the course of, but actually fasting in it. And whoso is, of course, sick or on a journey, once again, it has been repeated from above. So if you're sick or you're on a journey, then you can do it a number of other days. So God desires for your easiness, or yuridullahu bikumul yusra. God doesn't really make things difficult for you. He wants ease for you and desires not for you hardship, but that you complete the number. So siyam is still, days numbered, few days. You have to complete the number. And that you magnify God for guiding you. وَلِتُكَبَّرُ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, that you might be grateful. So apart from being in prudent fear, tattaqun, which we saw up above, we also know that it's the magnification of God for guiding in the right direction, and that we might be grateful. All right, let's continue on. Again, these are, if you recall the meanings of the word Saum, the secondary meaning, the supplicant meaning of Saum was also glorifying God. Okay? All right, move on. And when my servants question thee concerning me, I am near. I answer the call of the caller when he calls to me. So let him respond to me, and let them believe in me, that they might be guided. Verse 187, chapter 2, moving on, same context. It is lawful for you, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ. It is lawful for you to go unto your woman on the night of the fast, or the night of the siyam. They are a covering for you, and you are a covering for them. God knew that you deceived yourselves, and he turned in mercy towards you and pardoned you. Henceforth, lie with them and seek what God has ordained for you, and eat and drink until clear to you be the white thread from the black thread of the dawn. Then complete the fast until night. Then complete the siyam. Summa atimmu siyam ila al-layl. Then you should complete the siyam until night. So here, some facts that we also now know or being ascertained to us is that the context speaks of allowing us to be with women, right? Being with our women during siyam. While before, it seems like it was not the case. For some reason, it was not the case. And here the Quran now says, "Uhillakum," now it's okay. All right? So here's the context. So then complete the fast until night, and lie with them not when you remain in the places of worship. So, which means that if you are staying, right? Remember, one of the meanings of the word siyam was stay, right? Be in the place of prayer, standing, right? Something like that, right? That was one of the meanings that we took a look at earlier. So if you were in that particular place, fil masajid, right? Where people bow down in place of worship. And if you're staying there, and this is typically, by the way, the context is not for just being in one place. It's typically when people travel, because that's the context from above also, and they want to travel to a new place and they don't have a place to stay, they would end up staying in a mosque or in a masjid, right? Or in a church or whatever. Okay? So, and if you were there, then lie, with them not when you remain in the places of worship. Those are the limits of God. Approach them not. All right, so this is where the context ends for the first instance of the word siyam. All right, let's move on to the next instance, moving forward. The next chapter is 4. So chapter 4, verse 92 is where the word fasayam occurs again. So let's move on to that and see what God says in chapter 4 regarding siyam itself. So it's 492. Let me go ahead. Navigate to 492. Here we go. So this is Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 92. It is not for a believer to kill a believer, save in error. Okay? And whoso killed a believer in error, for example, like if you're traveling or you're driving your car and you accidentally hit someone, you accidentally killed someone, This is what the verse in context is speaking of. And whoso killed a believer in error, the manumission of a believing slave, and blood money delivered to his family, save if they forgive by way of charity. And if he be of a people hostile to you and a believer, the manumission of a believing slave. And if he be of a people between whom and you is an agreement, blood money delivered to his family, and the manumission of believing slave. This particular line, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ, and whoso has not the wherewithal. If you can't do all of this, right? If you can't do the blood money, if you can't pay the blood money, you just don't have it, but you killed a believer by accident. So, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ, this is the reason I'm highlighting this is because in the next several verses, in different chapters, God is going to let us know that if you can't do this, if you can't, pay the money, or if you can't do A, then you got to do B. Okay, so there's always the redemption element attached to any of these incidents. So whoso has not the wherewithal, what do? فَصِيَامُ شَهْرَيْنِ. So you do siyam for 2 months consecutively. All right. So you got to do, if you take the meaning of the word siyam as not eating, not drinking, that's going to be a pretty long siyam, okay? But anyways, I'm not going to focus on the meaning itself of not eating or drinking. It's just abstaining yourself and the other meanings that we took a look at, right, earlier. So keep those in mind. As we move along, I'm going to continue to reiterate the meanings so we eventually know and we can conclude. So this is the siyam for 2 months. If you kill a believer in error and you cannot pay blood money, then you have to do siyam for 2 months. And here's tawbatum minallah, as a repentance from God. And God is knowing, wise. Great. So this is the Surah Nisa, chapter 4, verse 92. Let's move on to the next instance. Let's go to chapter 5, verse 89. Perfect. This is chapter 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, and then verse 89. So let's start from the verse itself. God says, God will not take you to task for the vain speech in your oaths, but he will take you to task for what you contract by oath. Okay? So we take oaths and then we break them, right? So that's the context here. And the expiation thereof is the feeding of 10 needy persons. Again, the kafara, right, is feeding 10 needy people, miskin, or clothing of them, or the manumission of a slave. Here's the key word again, lam yajid, right? But whoso has not the wherewithal, if you can't do it, it's difficult. What do? You have to do siyam for salasati ayyam, this time only for 3 days. Okay? So in the previous instance, if you killed by accident a believer, you got to do siyam for 2 months consecutively. And here, you have to do siyam for 3 days. And of course, if you break your oath, right? You got to feed the poor people, 10 people. If you can't, you got to clothe them. If you can't, you got to manumit a slave. If you cannot do any of these, then you got to do siyam for 3 days. So again, in the order of, let's say, the punitive punishment, so to speak, right? Or as the kafara, the redemption, you got to do all of these things. And if you can't, then you got to do siyam for 3 days. That is the expiation of your oaths when you swear. Zalika kafaratu, right? But keeping your oath, of course, is better, right? Thus does God make plain to you his proofs. Kazalika yubayyinullahu lakum ayati, that you might be grateful. Perfect. Let's move on to the next instance. 595. Same surah. So I'm just going to scroll down to 95 here. So Allah says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O you heed warning, kill no game when you are forbidden. La taqtulu sayda wa antum hurum, right? And whoso of you kills it intentionally, the payment is like of what he killed from grazing livestock. So again, the context starts with being forbidden from hunting. Okay? And we know from the Quranic context that this was near Masjid al-Haram when people used to visit from all over the world, not just Muslims, right? Because the Masjid al-Haram was for linnas, it was for everyone. Anyone could go and take a look at, where Abraham basically raised all these standards of believing in one God, right? And that's what basically everyone had to follow. Okay. All right, not the case today, but this is what the Quran states. So here, once again, the context is about hunting being forbidden. So if I scroll down, let judge it two just men from among you by requirement reaching the leg joint. A ka'batu is the leg joint, and protruding. For expiation, kafara, once again, it's like redemption, right? What do you got to do? You got to feed poor persons or equivalent of that in siyam. So now this is now tayammum miskin aw adlu zalika siyam. So here siyam goes hand in hand with feeding the poor, like giving, right? So the sense is like give. You got to do something. If you do something that you're not supposed to do, then as redemption or as a punitive element, you have to do siyam. And again, siyam only when you cannot feed, you cannot, clothe, and so it's one of the last resorts. So feeding poor persons or equivalent of that in siyam, that he might taste the evil consequences of his deed. So we now know that the reason why we do kafara, why we do siyam is, well, we shouldn't have done what God has told us not to do, right? So God pardons what is past, but also goes back and so on. So this is chapter 5, verse 89. Once again, you were supposed to do something and you didn't do it, you got to do siyam. Great. Let's move on to chapter 33, and then we'll move to chapter 58, right? Which is the last one. So chapter 33 has two instances in verse 16 and 17. So 35, let's take a look at those. So 33, 35. Let's move on to that particular chapter. All right. So this is Surah Al-Ahzab, by the way, chapter 33, and we'll start with verse 35. The submitted men in innamal muslimin, and the submitted women, muslimat, and the believing men, and the believing women, and the devoutly dutiful men, and the devoutly dutiful women, and the truthful men, truthful women, and the patient men, and the patient women, and the humble men, humble women, and the men who give charity, and the women who give charity. And here we go. وَالصَّائِمِينَ, and the men who do ṣawm, ṣiyām, right? The men who fast, and the women, ṣāimāt. So these are the two instances in Surah Al-Ahzab, which is chapter 33, verse 35. All right. Last but not least, let's go to 58:4. Chapter 58, verse 4. And this will be Surah Al-Mujadala, because that's where the instance of the word siyam has also occurred. And once again, the context is among assisting wives. So let me just scroll down to 58:4. Perfect. So I'm going to start with verse 1, and then I'm going to just end up at verse 5. So just 4 verses. So chapter 58, Surah Al-Mujadala. Okay. So Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. God has heard the sayings of her that disputes with thee concerning her husband and complains to God. And God hears the conversation between you. God is hearing, seeing. Those among you who assist among their wives, they're not their mothers. Their mothers are only those who give them birth, and they say what is perverse among sayings and a falsehood, and God is forgiving, merciful. And those who assist among their wives then go back on what they have said, the freeing of a slave before they touch one another. That are you exhorted to do, and God is aware of what you do. Here's the key word again, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ, and whoso has not the wherewithal, right? You can't do it or whatever, okay? What do you got to do? Guess what? فَالصِّيَامُ شَهْرَيْنِ. So this time you got to do siyam for 2 months consecutively or 2 moons consecutively before they touch one another, okay? And whoso is not able, then you got to feed of 60 needy ones, miskin, 60 needy people. And that is that you might believe in God and his messenger. And those are the limits of God. Once again, in the context of all of these instances of siyam that you've seen, and we've covered from chapter 2, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 33 and 58, all the 14 instances. And we also understand the meaning of the word siyam. Let's see if I can pull that up once again. Page 1750. All right, I'm going to open up my browser here. I already have it. Okay, there we go. So, coming back, before we actually do some conclusion, right, on all these verses and all the context that we've actually went through. So the meaning of the word saum is to abstain. That's one of the sense that we get. Absolute sense is abstaining, fasting, standing, time-based, right? It's also something staying away from the appearance or the ugly, right, appearance, so to speak. So all of these are within the meanings of the word saum, with the root sense, okay? So where does it lead us? Let me bring up my notes here. I already have some notes here. So abstaining from something, glorifying God, and time phrase. That kind of makes sense, okay? And we also know it is a universal. Ṣiyām is universal. It's not for any specific religion. We know that food and drink is even given to prisoners of war. So abstaining yourself from food or drink is not helping anyone except perhaps yourself, because doctors today say fast, it's good for your health, etc., right? Perfect. But it's just helping you. It's not really a redemption. It's not really, something that you did and then you're doing kafara, you're doing giving fidya, right? So nothing is happening if you're just not drinking or eating. So redemption is actually when the word siyam is mostly used in the Quranic context. So if you kill someone by accident, all right, you can do ṣawm. You break the oath, you can do ṣawm. If you're unable to assist wives, or if you revert back, you got to do ṣawm. If you're forbidden to hunt and then you hunt, you got to do ṣawm, okay? And of course, feed the poor and give. So it is more closer, the entire context of the word is more closer to being a service. So as a punitive element or as a redemption sense of giving, okay? So all of this kind of falls, the sense of giving, glorifying God, time phrase, few days, is just, whether it's 2 months, 3 months, 3 days, or a month itself, right? So all of those contexts within the word ṣawm falls, at least to my understanding of the broader context, in the community service. So as a service, because now you're not just abstaining yourself from food or drink, you're actually abstaining yourself in a sense where you're actually going out there and doing a service to others, okay, for those few days in a given year or a given month or whatever is easier for you. So this is more in line with the actual meanings of the context of the word ṣawm. The Quran also doesn't really talk about the atonement of personal sins. like typically the Muslim community as well as the Jews and Judaism also says, well, it is our sins. We pay our, we do Saum, we do fasting. In other words, we self-inflict, okay, by not drinking, by not eating, to glorify God as redemption. But this context is not really part of what the Quran is talking about, right? Remember, the Quran talks about, again, if you killed someone by accident, you broke your oath, you didn't, assist your wives, or you hunted, things like that. So that's where you have to do Saum, but not really, if you did any other things, if you didn't pray, for example, or if you didn't read the Quran, for example, and you think you're committing a sin, well, that's not the case. Clearly not the case. Whereas, as far as Saum is concerned. So, and let's lastly but not least, now we understand that a Saum, means all of these above things that we talked about. Now I want to talk briefly about, before I conclude, finally, the Judaic concept. So in Leviticus 23.3 is where you will see where it's 23 to 27, I believe, or 23 to 25, where they talk about the actual concept of fasting. Okay, so this is again the Talmud, the oral Torah that was brought down, and if you read all of these, you'll come to the conclusion that Jews, or the Judaism also, they do fasting and they abstain themselves from food and drink. Whereas the concept is more related towards, Sabbath, and also giving charity, because in certain times of the year you would not work, you will take, day off, and then you will just give from whatever your crops are, right? So if you have land, you have crops, you will give those crops away to the poor people. So that's the concept behind behind Judaism also. And once again, keep in mind, within Judaism, there are different sects, okay? Just like in Islam, there are different sects, okay? So, and why fast, for example, on Yom Kippur? This is one of the days of atonement for them, is again just to the concept of self-denial, which seems to be the most expressive, whereas fasting, abstaining from food and drink for the entire day. And the reason is that to seek reconciliation with God and humanity, right? Repentance involves a critical self-assessment of the past year and resolve to avoid lapses in sensitivity in the future. So again, the concept here being advocated in Judaism is different from what the Quran is saying. Okay? All right. So I just wanted to cover quickly this part as well. I hope this helps. I just wanted to kind of run through the meaning of the actual word itself, the root word. We looked at all the 14 instances in the Quran. They're very clear, very easy to understand, self-explanatory. We explored within context all of the verses. And then, of course, the conclusion, well, you're the best judge. Think of siyām. What do you do when you actually don't drink and fast? You're actually doing it for yourself, and of course you're doing it for God, right? That's the reason why you do it. But does it really give you the prudent fear? Because remember, one of the things that is the reason why you fast or why you do siyām is so you can have prudent fear. Now, the only way, or the common way you can have prudent fear, is when you actually give. So in the real sense, siyām is really like zakat, right? It's like giving, okay? And we also explored in which instances, all the 14 instances, majority of them talk about, like fidya or kafara, like redemption, or if you accidentally kill the believer, then you gotta do siyām, 2 months, 3 months, days, so different variations. So nowhere in the Quran, of course, it talks specifically about not eating and not drinking, okay? The only instance in chapter 2, verse 183, when it starts with the word siyām, the context is about, all right, you can lay with women, you can be with your women, it's allowed now, before it wasn't, right? So that the context is clearly different from what typically people are following in today's age. So since Quran is complete, it's for entire mankind. It's a message. It gives guidance to all of us. It's not just for a specific group of people. Anyone can read and actually be guided from this particular book. And this is a fairly easy book because God says God doesn't want any difficulty for people. Okay, it's basically the people like us who make things difficult. All right, and typically to read the other context of the Quran, like Surah Tawbah, where Quran says these are the bishops and the popes and the ulama, the alim, the muftis, the maulanas, all these people, they actually created majority of these traditions, customs, um, and of course not in the Quran itself. Everything is external. Just like Talmudic Jews, we have the hadiths and so on. So I hope this helps. Comment down below. I'd like to get your thoughts on if you have any questions, if you need something clarified, I'll be happy to do so. Um, leave your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe, share, and hit that bell notification so you keep in touch. I regularly do research. This is one of my passions that I've developed, so much because this is a fascinating book and one of the books that actually challenges mankind of, bringing up with such text. And so far, no one has, right? It's just absolutely mind-boggling, at least to myself. That's why it's one of my passions to actually do the research and focus on the Quran-only research. Of course, I have extensive knowledge of all of the books, and I've read all the different religions, the different sects, their teachings, and so on, right? So after all of that knowledge in my backdrop is when I read the Quran and I find this book to be complete and complete guidance for every one of us, regardless of who you are, where you are. Hope this helps with this. Assalamu alaikum.